Welcome to the Market Me podcast with your host, Mike Mall. Each episode of Market Me deconstructs real campaigns for actual businesses to improve their marketing efforts. Mike is the founder of Social Media House and a digital marketing consultant who teaches marketing strategy to executives and their teams from small business to Fortune 500 companies. Let's get started.
On this episode of the Market Me podcast, we're speaking with Donnie Boivin.
Look at that.
Not
you got
bad.
it right, dude. Well done. Well done. I'm impressed.
CEO of Success Champion, which sounds just like a badass name. So I'm excited to dive into that. But thanks for coming on.
Oh, dude, Mike, I'm looking forward to this, man. You're hanging out. That's the thing I love about podcasts. You're sitting in Portugal. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. And it's literally like we're sitting at a coffee shop having a conversation. I freaking love this.
Yeah, it's funny. When everybody started going into the work from home mode, people were texting me and sending me messages. Have you heard of Slack? Have you heard of Zoom? I'm like, I've run a fully remote agency for 7 years. I've been using these the entire time.
Welcome to the 21st century. I mean,
That's right. So you guys are involved in a couple of different things within the organization, author, speaker. You've got an amazing backstory as well. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your backstory first?
Sure.
Yeah.
So former United States Marine. And then spent 20 years as a straight commission sales guy. I was 40 years old when I realized I'd spent my entire fucking life making everybody else wealthy. So I decided to jump on the entrepreneur bandwagon because, you'll be a millionaire overnight and, life is all sunshine and rainbows. And yeah, so I launched Success Champion in September of 2017. So as we're sitting right here having this conversation, this is my 3-year mark. And but when I launched the business, I spent 20 years working for somebody else. So I launched my business and I got really good at trying to create another job for myself versus the company. So I was on the brink of completely running the business into the ground when I found podcasting, and podcasting really turned the business around for a number of reasons, but a lot of it taught me operations and how to hire a team and how to start thinking bigger than I was in the first place. And, the podcast took off. We hit the top 200 charts and all that, which people will learn is completely irrelevant. Doesn't mean shit. But we hit all the charts, and then from there, we launched. So we had the Success Champions podcast. We then launched a Facebook group, Success Champions Magazine. I think we're up to almost 10,000 subscribers on that right now. Then the Badass Business Summit, which is happening this weekend, and now Success Champion Virtual Networking Group. So we're just teaching the world how to be the champion of their own success. Fucking quit betting on other people because nobody's betting on your ass. So pick up your own damn sword and run like hell.
Yeah. I love it, man. This is awesome. And so, the core of the content from the podcast is, from what I've seen, it's, there's sales, there's, you speaking with other people about their story. What would you kind of classify the business as? Is it a kind of a coaching mentorship type?
It's funny. Everybody tries to put me in the category of a business coach, but I'm not really a business coach. I don't know. I hate labels in general. But for the most part, I'm teaching people the business development aspect of their business because everybody thinks they have this huge sales problem in their business. And the truth is nobody's got a fucking sales problem. They got a business development problem. They struggle to actually get to a sales conversation because they won't do the work, put in the time, and do the things that need to be done to get there. So I teach a lot through my screw ups, failures, fuck ups, and life lessons, and literally try and walk people through how I continue and how have found success and continue to find success from that journey. So not really a consultant per se, not really just a speaker. Really, I'm just a guy that's carving a path and hope others follow it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, it's funny that you mentioned, I have a lot of conversations with people around sales. It's something I've been in for a long time as well. And I think people struggle to put in the work to build the relationships. And then at that point, it's already too late. You can get somebody on a sales call, but if you don't have any kind of, any kind of relationship, or they don't have any kind of awareness of you or any of those things, it's such an uphill battle selling to someone who has no trust or no knowledge of you whatsoever.
Well, and a lot of the gurus that are in the marketplace right now grew up in transactional sales. So, if you look at the backgrounds of the people that are teaching sales out there and go look what they sold, it was a one-time deal, which they didn't need a relationship. They just needed to close the shit out so they can get their commission. And if most people that are not in transactional sales, real sales, where people aren't walking on your car lot, and need to buy a car, then you have got to up your game. And that means you got to learn simple shit like small talk. Holy shit, which is a lost art, it seems like. You got to actually give a shit about other people, and get curious about the world and want to get to know them. And, if you attempt to do what a lot of people are teaching sales stuff nowadays, if you attempt to do half that shit on a real sales call, you're going to get your teeth kicked in. Right. I grew up on guys like Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy, great guys. Just don't follow their sales shit, because, Zig sold insurance. Brian sold insurance, Grant Cardone, those guys, Grant Cardone sold cars, and so these guys are all transactional in nature. And if you're in transactional sales, follow their lead. They're fucking experts in it, but if you're not in transactional sales, you're in big boy, ongoing, relationship sales. Turn that shit off and go make friends. It's a crazy world we live in.
Sure is. And it's amazing how quickly common sense or any sense goes out the window around these conversations.
Oh, all day long. Yeah. When I was the last stint that I did, before I jumped on my own, I worked for an organization called Sandler Training, one of the biggest sales training, companies in the world. And I used to take these young kids to do ride-alongs, as I was, their mentor, coach, trainer, whatever the hell it was called. And it would be so funny is on the way to the sales call, me and this young person, I would go as a sales guy in training. That was my title. So I could sneak in on the sales call with them and see everything that they did and see all the interactions. And, on the way to the sales call, me and this young kid, guy, girl, whatever, would be having these great, fun, relaxed, organic conversations. But as soon as we pulled up to where the sales call was and the door opened, it was like Jekyll and Hyde, man. They flipped the script and became somebody completely different. And I would go in as a sales guy in training. So, they'd get in the call and they'd start stumbling and fumbling and they would look at me and they're like, so Donnie, what do you think? And I'm like, dude, I'm just a sales guy in training. I don't know. I don't even have the knowledge you have of this stuff. So, this is on you. And we get out of the call. And the first thing I'd ask them is, dude, what happened? We went into the call and you were all freaking, stoked with, being a real person. And then you went on the call and you were somebody else. So, and I think that's what happens to a lot of people in general is they're just caught up in the moment and forget where they are and don't want to connect with people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to go back into the podcast space because I have a little bit of an addiction to it at this point. I only 70, maybe 73, 74 episodes in, but it's just been such a wild ride. I've really enjoyed it. I've built great relationships. It's done wonders for my business. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, the impact that podcast has had, obviously on sales, but just on branding, awareness of you, awareness of the company. Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective.
Absolutely. When I launched the podcast, I did it because I had happened to be interviewed on a show and it was horrible. The host was horrible. The questions they asked were horrible. And I'm like, man, if this guy can have any success whatsoever, I've got to launch a podcast. So, literally that's the entire thought process I had behind launching a podcast. So, when I launched the show, I got to admit that I didn't have a whole lot of vision. I didn't have a whole lot of idea of what I was going to do. I just knew I wanted to talk and meet more people. What I wasn't prepared for was now finding that podcasting is the greatest networking tool on the face of the earth. There is literally nothing better for networking than podcasting. I have met so many just phenomenal, awesome people some that have become clients, more that have become friends, that we're just rising together through podcasting. And it changed the dynamic of a lot of things in my world. Imagine walking into a networking group and somebody says, "What do you do?" And you say, "I'm a sales trainer." They don't necessarily want to run up and give you a hug at that point, right? But you look at them and say, "I'm a podcaster." And now it's this weird, like, complete change. And they get into it. They're like, "Ooh, tell me about your show. What do you do? Well, how long you been doing it? How do I listen to it?" And it's equivalent to being like a radio DJ or a news anchor or something. It's kind of crazy. But brand wise, two things I think have happened. It's allowed me to get in the doors and get into conversations I don't think I would have ever gotten otherwise. And two, it's gotten me into a higher caliber of networking, and it's gotten me into, just some bigger league conversations. I mean, if I would have done this back when I was doing any other position, I think I would have crushed it a hell of a lot more than I did. And I was pretty damn good at sales. But, when you got a tool like this, you can play to people's vanities so hard that it's insane. I mean, you call up almost any CEO and you're like, "Hey, I got a show that's, got a lot of followers, a lot of listeners. You got a really cool story. I'd love to interview you on the podcast." Dude, they take that call. And it's just, I don't know. It completely changed everything that we were doing with the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And so someone's like, "Okay, I'm bought in, I think the biggest thing for me, and you mentioned it, is getting into rooms that you wouldn't get into any other way.
Yeah.
Hey, can I buy you a coffee? Hey, can I do that? No. Hey, can I have you on my podcast? Hell yeah.
Yes.
It's such an easy sell. And I don't think that'll change anytime soon, because as much as the number of podcasts are growing, there's still something about it. It's still such a young medium in the big picture of things, which is cool. And then you talk about, so if someone's thinking, "Okay, I got to jump on this train, I'm in." You talk a little bit about business voice and how to find it and how to decide. I mean, I'm assuming from my understanding of it, that's around like, what is going to be the cadence of your show? What are the topics? What are the guests? Like, how do someone wrap their head around strategizing that?
Yeah, so I love picking on financial advisors. Why? Because everybody hates them. You go to an event and there's 12 financial advisors sitting in the room, right? But it's because they don't know how to promote to the marketplace. So I use them often when I'm doing keynotes and whatnot. I talk about, guys, if you're going to start a podcast, this is all you got to do. And to find your business voice really means your content and everything, your cadence, everything you said. But so it's really simple. Think about, and if your listeners, if you're listening, think about it this way. What's the number one thing you geek out on? So like, Mike, for you, what's the number one thing you geek out on?
It's absolutely marketing.
Marketing. Awesome. So if you geek out on marketing, right, then you got to start a show that's geared towards marketing. And there's a number of reasons for this. One, podcasting is a very long play, right? It takes a little bit for you to find your cadence, rhythm, and figure everything out. And it takes you screwing a lot of shit up and having some bad episodes and having some bad guests because you didn't interview them right or do the right research or whatever else, right? So you first have to figure out what you completely geek out on. So I had a young guy that he was selling life insurance. And he comes and he sits down in my office and he's like, "Dude, I'm about to be fired from this company because nobody wants to buy life insurance." I'm like, "Yeah, nobody gives a shit about life insurance until you're ready to die, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, my point exactly." I said, "All right, cool. What'd you do as a kid?" He goes, "What do you mean what I do as a kid?" I said, what was that thing you geeked out on as a kid? He goes, "I race go-karts." I'm like, "What do you mean you race go-karts?" He goes, "Yeah, dude, there's this full circuit. Go-karts go 90 miles an hour round a track, and it's a whole ordeal." I'm like, "Holy shit, 90-mile go-karts." I'm used to shit like at Six Flags, where you're going like 10 miles an hour. And he goes, "That's a whole ordeal, sponsors and everything. So it looks like NASCAR. You're just in, or the Indy, whatever the other damn racing is, but you're just in go-karts. And I said, okay. I don't suppose there's a track anywhere close to us, is there? He goes, oh yeah, there's a track about 45 minutes from us. I'm like, I probably haven't been up there in a while. He goes, oh no, I haven't been there since I was a kid. I said, and you sell life insurance? He goes, yeah. I said, I bet that's a pretty fucking dangerous sport. He goes, yeah, dude, people die every year. I'm like, so they don't need life insurance? He goes, I fucking hate you. So two things that this guy did. One, he launched a freaking show on go-kart racing, of all things, and he started interviewing the drivers, the pit guys, the manufacturers, all these people. Long story short, the dude now, I'm not sure his show still airs, but he now is a driver, sponsored driver, has a ridiculously thriving, life insurance business, and he's doing it all in the world he loves. So if you're going to start a show, start on something you completely geek out on. So let's say it's fly fishing and you're a financial advisor and you launch a show about fly fishing. Now, I want you to reach out to everybody you know and say, hey, I need some CEOs that love to fly fish. Who do you know? And just reach out to everybody and say, I need some CEOs that love to fly fish. Now, these CEOs who are running multi-million-dollar corporations, you call them up and you send them this message. Hey, I have a podcast on CEOs who fly fish. And I would love to talk to you about your story and how you use fly fishing to get away from the hectic life of business. Dude, that CEO is going to take that call, right? And he's going to, jump on there. And then you get an hour to sit with the CEO and just geek out together on fly fishing, of what the freaking thing is. And then, so now you're totally geeking out on this. And then when the show airs, you send him this nice little package of the show, the videos, everything else. Send it to him and say, hey, at some point, I'd like to buy you lunch to say thank you. And then go meet the dude for lunch and celebrate together. I guarantee you get that second lunch call just because you brought him value first. So start off with going to find whatever you geek out on.
Yeah. It sounds so obscure, but it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fly Fishing for CEOs podcast. That's not going to be my next show.
No, mine either. Mine either.
I don't think you'll ever catch me fishing, to be honest. Well, that's not true, but not by choice. It would be like a
survival situation.
Right. You got it. So good. Yeah. Really good insight. I think it's a really interesting out of the box approach that I think, you can really take a step back and unpack that for yourself and understand, where your customers might be, pair it with something that you want to talk about or share. It doesn't have to be professional. It can just be something that could go hand in hand and really launch in with that. So that's great advice.
Thanks.
On the other side of things, curious about your thoughts, so I like the idea of hosting a show, and there's a lot to unpack inside of, how to structure it. Do you ask the same questions? Do you do a free form thing? How do you go in? And I think,
and you don't do it on Anchor. That was the only other thing I wanted to get in there. Don't host on Anchor. Anything else is fine.
Got it. I've never experienced it, but I'll take your advice. I'm a Buzzsprout guy.
No, right on. We use Simplecast, so
there you go. Shout out to Buzzsprout and Simplecast. But I think, at that point, there's a lot of twists and turns around how to actually host that show. So I'll let people use their imagination on that side. But switching the topic around, my kind of final question. So say I've got this podcast or I've got this business service and I want to get out there. I want some exposure, and I'm thinking about going on podcasts as, as a way of just bringing awareness to me, bringing awareness to my product or my business. How do you go about, obviously we talked a little bit offline, you're 400 interviews in, I'm about 30 and so I got a couple to catch up on, but I have my own kind of thoughts in my head about this, but how do you strategize going in and crushing an interview? Just from your perspective.
Well, two thoughts. One, it's your story, right? So as my dad told me when I was young, always tell your story and don't fabricate it too much, because then you won't have to remember what you said. So be true to yourself. And you'll hear people say unapologetically you. But the more true you are to your core, the better off the interview will be. Second, go get on a bunch of shitty small shows to start off. Go cut your teeth, because what you're going to find, I mean, Chris Rock, I watched a special on him, one of the greatest comedians out there. I love Chris Rock, and he said before he would do an HBO special, he would literally do 400 small comedy clubs because he was practicing his different material. It's the same thing for interviews. I think if you go get on a whole bunch of shows, and what I mean by small shows, go find shows that have less than 10 episodes out there, right? They're just getting started in the game. They're hungry for people. And likely if you reach out, you'll be the first person that ever reached out to them to say, hey, can I get on your show? It's really easy to get on their shows.
Yeah.
So go there and just get used to get quick on your feet. I mean, get used to telling your stories. And I think for me, what I've tried to do with interviews is I always watch the response of the interviewer. When you hit a good note or you hit a good story, their mannerisms and shit have changed. So when you finally start wrapping your core stories together, you can really put out some amazing interviews, and put out some just really, really cool content.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I know that, you can, it's funny too, because you can feel when it was a good interview versus not. I've gone into a few where I'm like, man, this will be a great opportunity, a great person to speak with. And then I was like, you almost leave saying like, what did I just say? What did I just say for the last 45 minutes? It feels like just mind numbing, just verbal diarrhea of nothing.
Right.
So I've, been there, and I, for me, I have like a really crappy memory. And so for me, I agree with this. I've kind of found a little bit of a cadence to how I talk about myself and how I talk about my past. And it's funny because if you would ask me before I started podcasting at all, does it feel staged to have this almost like packaged version of who you are and what you do? And I would have said yes. And now seeing the impact and as a podcaster and a podcastee, you kind of listen for that, the points and the consistencies, because it really does help you feel more credible or get your story across in a more impactful way when it feels like you have a process or a system of telling the stuff,
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. One, to give your listeners an idea of it. So on some shows, I've told the story of why I made the leap. I actually made the leap. And what happened is me and my business partner at the time had gone out to dinner, having cocktails, and we were celebrating. This story, guys, I learned to tell because I told it enough times. I figured out how to tell it. So here's the story, and then I'll tell you how I tell it. So the story is, while we're at the dinner, he said, Donnie, thank you for being my retirement plan. And that was the catalyst for me to jump out on my own. The first time I told that story, I said it just like that, just straight through. Now when I go on interviews, I tell the story like this. So my business partner at the time and I were out having drinks. I was having a great time. We're really celebrating. We were celebrating how big we'd built the company. We'd celebrating, all the successes and all the wins we had. And then towards the end of dinner, my business partner looked at me and he said a phrase that forever changed my life. And what he said was, Donnie, thank God you're my retirement plan. And when and he said it out of love, and I responded out of love because he really meant it. He was being grateful, and so was I. And then I walked to my truck. And when I got to my truck, the first thought that ran through my house is, what the fuck are you doing? You're literally somebody else's retirement plan. And I tell you that story, then that's all true. That's all really how it played out. But the difference being is I've told that story enough time to understand where the pause needs to happen, right? Understand where to deliver it, because if you don't have that cadence to the story, when you tell it, you'll gloss over and they won't catch the moment you want them to catch.
Right.
And then the second portion of that, when interviewed, shut the fuck up every once in a while. It's the host show. Let them talk. Nothing worse than getting somebody on your show and they won't shut the hell up. Myself included.
Yeah. Hey, I've been there. Trust me. I was so excited to be on this conference once that I was like, I had 45 minutes of material, and man, did I go through it. I was like, I watched it after. I was like, how nobody picked up anything.
They didn't learn shit.
They didn't learn shit. Too many words on the slides. Too many words out of the mouth.
Yep.
Nothing good came of this, which is too bad because it's a good opportunity. But you gotta. I think you have to suck at this stuff enough because it's not that natural.
Yeah.
The storytelling, speaking, being interviewed, it's not. There's a cadence, there's a language, there's a skill set to it that's just, for most people, it's very unnatural. For salespeople, it's a little bit better because we're used to, hyping things up in that way. But yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to look at it like actors or, people in the theater, dude, they are rehearsing and practicing all the time. I mean, these big, not to get politics, but politicians, they're training on a regular basis to handle questions so they can go on these interviews. So to think that you're just going to go on and rock something, that is a conceited ass way to look at life. I mean, I'm a pretty cocky dude. I know that. And I think I can handle myself in most situations. But the first time I was interviewed on the news, I was about to piss myself, and all I could think of is, please God, remember at least one story,
Yeah. Is that a Marine thing or a Texas thing?
Yes.
Got it. Makes sense.
But I think at the end of the day, man, just go have fun and get in a real conversation. And the other last thing on the interview is understand what the show's trying to accomplish and help the host get there.
Yeah, 100%. I think actually that is like a real gold nugget, because you have your agenda. You want people to know about this thing you're doing and the awareness. And that's something that I picked up on, even asking people to come on their show, is like seeing some episodes and then saying, hey, this is what I think I can bring to your audience. Are you interested in that thing? And it pays off.
Dude, I'll tell you, I've had some creative reach out. I've got so many PR companies trying to get people on my show. It drives me nuts. But probably the most creative reach out that I ever had was a guy drew my caricature and sent it to me. And he sent me a thing. He's like, look, man, I don't have a big following, but I got a pretty cool story. And he sent me his Instagram was like 300 people. His, LinkedIn was like 400 people. Yeah. But the fact that he drew me a caricature, I was like, fuck yes, he is on the show. I don't care what his story is, and he literally, he repairs water fountains for a living. I've interviewed Neil Patel, Shailene Johnson, some household freaking names, and the guy who repairs water fountains.
Hey, you never know. Yeah, my secret sauce on that front is sending video messages. So on LinkedIn, on Instagram, that's the only way I communicate is video. Just camera in the face. Yo, what's up? Because I have a folder on my phone of people that wrote back and they're like, holy shit, I can't believe you sent me a video. Like, just pages and pages and pages of that, and it's like the impact is profound. So that's my version of the caricature.
Yeah, I love it.
Also can't draw, so that's a bit of a challenge.
Right. Well, and I think because most people, when they do a reach out, it's all about them, right? It's like, let me tell you how awesome I am. I wrote a book, or blah 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 blah. Fuck that. Praise the podcaster. Go in and say, dude, I listened to episode 291, and let me tell you, when you asked this question, it was a gut punch, and here's my takeaways from it. Right? Go over the top to stroke their ego, because nobody launches a podcast without having a little bit of ego and going for them. So stroke the shit out of it.
Exactly. That is the secret sauce. Anyway, Donnie, really appreciate your time. Really good insights, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I get out of here, let me do one thing for your audience.
Yeah.
Guys, if you got any value out of this show whatsoever, do Mike a favor and go teach one other person how to listen to a show. One of the amazing things for me about podcasting is how few people still know how to listen. So if you got any nuggets out of this thing, any one portion of this was a freaking gold for you, go tell one other person literally how to put the podcast on their phone, subscribe them, and get them listening to the show. It'll mean everything for him.
Appreciate it. And and I'll link you up in the show notes as well, but where's the best place to find you?
So one of the biggest things I struggled with in building my business was creating content. So I literally taught a class to a bunch of small business owners about how to create content. It's 45 minutes long. If your listeners are interested, I'll send that to them. So if they send the words, "I am a success champion" to 817-318-6030, I will send that to them. So I am a success champion, 817-318-6030.
Awesome. That is the first of its kind on this show. I usually get a URL, so I love it. Very interesting. And I'll
So from a marketing
over.
perspective, you guys will love this. The world's moving to text very, very fast. So if you don't have text in your repertoire, get it in there quickly, because it's the one thing you can't do a dump. Because everybody's got a dump email. That email you sign up for all the crap on.
Yeah.
You can't do that with a text.
It's true.
So
good point. Awesome, man. Well, really appreciate your time again. It was great chatting.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it.